This video is sponsored by Skillshare.
Hello, my darling magic makers. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me. I hope you're all doing very well. It is May, it is sunny, and I'm feeling it. So I've got my lemon earrings in and I'm feeling super Carmen Miranda about the whole thing. Darlings, are you a real witch? Am I a real witch? Who are the real witches? It's a very contentious issue, isn't it? This notion of witchy legitimacy, accusing somebody of not being a real witch, or indeed having that accusation pointed at you. It can be something that brings up a lot of tension. It feels very, very personal. And as a witchcraft mentor, first of all, I do some of the most incredible work that fills my heart up, and I'm so grateful to be able to do that. But second of all, it gives me a little bit of an inside track on various different issues that come up for witches time and time again. Witches from different parts of the world, witches from different traditions. They've been witches for different lengths of time. But one thing that comes up time and time again over the years in my conversations is this idea of like, am I a real witch? You know, and somebody said I wasn't a real witch based on XYZ thing. And could that be the case? What does it take to be a real witch? What does that term even mean? Or is it just something that we throw about when we want to be a bit catty with each other? We're not maybe even so sure what it means. So I want to talk about that today. I want to get into it and share some of my thoughts. And I really, really want to hear from you in the comments section on this one, because I think it is interesting. I have certainly been accused myself several times over of not being a real witch in any regard. And so I think it's really interesting why that comes up, why the accusation has been thrown at me, and different types of witches for whom the accusation is thrown out quite a bit, and why that is, and how we can reframe some of those aspects of witchcraft that we tend to look at and maybe question their legitimacy. If you've ever worried that you're not a real witch, if you've ever wondered if somebody else is a real witch, if you ever feel insecure in your legitimacy in your witchcraft, then this is the video for you. Or if you just want to hear me ramble for a little bit about something that interests me deeply, welcome. Pull up a chair, grab a beverage, and let's do this. So I've been thinking recently, darlings, about some of the types of witch that might end up having this accusation thrown at them, that they are not real practitioners. And also the types of witch that might throw this accusation at themselves, because that happens actually more often. I was going to say just as often, but really it's like more often that a practitioner might doubt their own legitimacy in their craft. They might wonder whether or not they are a real witch and what the standard would be to be able to meet for themselves so that they can feel convinced of their own legitimacy in their practice. So I want to talk about some of the different categories that I notice come up when this whole real witch insecurity does the round. It's an insecurity / accusation. It depends. If the person is throwing it at themselves, then it's like a self-accusation, which I think often comes from an insecurity or a desire to kind of meet some kind of standard, whether they're really sure what that standard is or not. And when it comes from somebody else towards you, or indeed if you are someone that has accused someone else of it, then, you know, that can also come from an insecurity. And I want to get into that a little bit later, actually. I want to talk about why people might accuse someone of not being a real witch. So here are some categories that I notice, and I find it really interesting that these patterns occur. All right, the first category is newbie witches, okay? Newbie witches, witches that are much newer to the path. They have not had a lot of years under their belt. They might not even have had a year under their belt of declaring themselves a witch and moving into some kind of witchcraft practice and witchcraft learning. There might be a lot of insecurity around that, and it might be something that if somebody was going to throw anything at you, it would be the I know more than you do, you don't even know your ass from your elbow, bitch, you're still wet behind the ears, okay? Because you haven't been witching that long. So yeah, it can be something that causes insecurity. And this is true on many different paths, whether they're spiritual paths or if it's a path of any kind of learning or experience. We tend to feel like we are less legitimate when we have got less sort of like time served, essentially. So once we get a few years under our belt, we might feel like the legitimacy, the sense of legitimacy naturally rises within us if we were feeling a little bit unsteady. But when you are brand new to the path, you have so much more to learn. You might not understand all the lingo yet, and you might not really understand what your path is supposed to look like yet. That can definitely cause insecurity. And it would be a cheap shot, I think, if somebody accused you of not being a real witch because you don't know enough yet or you're newer to the path. It's a cheap shot, but it does happen, and I have seen it happen. This was back in the dark days of the forums, darling. The forums. Yeah, it kind of was a thing that happened. Listen, everybody starts somewhere, okay? Beginners deserve respect, not ridicule. They don't deserve to have everything handed to them on a plate. They don't necessarily deserve more experienced witches to come in and, you know, like kit them out with everything that they need to know, etc. They need to do their own research and their own learning in some way, but they are deserving of respect and they are deserving of a place at the table. If you're watching this and you've only been a witch for a week, you've only claimed that word for the last week, guess what? You're a witch. And I'm sure you were a witch for quite a while beforehand, quite a while before you even realized. And then you went on some kind of journey of being able to claim the word. And depending upon your upbringing and what was going on there and what kinds of ideas were around you in culture and how supported you felt, it might have been a while that you were actually a witch on the inside, but not really sort of claiming it and not really doing anything about it. And that's fine. Nobody knows your path. Nobody gets the fucking right to tell you your level of legitimacy or how you feel about the practices you're engaged in or the practices you're going to engage in the future. So fuck that shit, okay? Like I said, everyone's got to start somewhere. And when I look back at myself as a teenage witch, as a like 14-year-old witch, just really scratching the surface, only just getting that first taste of what the craft was all about, was I a witch at that point in time? More than I ever was. More than I ever. I would never say that I'm more a witch now than I was then. I was reaching for witchcraft by way of survival. I was reaching for it by way of instinct without knowing so many of the things that I know now. But it was raw. It was real. It was primal. It was a primal urge. It was a desire that I couldn't ignore. It was a part of myself, a door in the house of my psyche that I could not slam closed. It kept opening. And so my instinct to move towards it was one of the most witchy decisions I ever made in my life. And I didn't know anywhere near as much as what I know now, of course. So yeah, I definitely feel like I was a fucking legit witch as a 14-year-old with absolutely zero experience, pretty much. I did my first spell when I was 13 with 2 girls at a sleepover. And when I was 14, I started like dabbling on my own with things. And do I give myself all of my flowers, my 14-year-old self, for witching? Fuck yes, I do. And I would never, as a 40-year-old woman, look at my 14-year-old self and be like, pathetic. You're not a real witch. You haven't fucking come up yet. You don't know you're born. I would never say that. If anybody ever says that to you, like, fuck them repeatedly. I think sometimes this hostility sort of, there's an adjacent hostility, isn't there, around kind of like the TikTok witches and the witches that are coming in with their very brand new and sometimes radical and maybe sometimes harebrained appearing ideas, visibility and, you know, digital presence and coming up with different things that haven't been written in any book and that a lot of witches maybe don't agree with, does not negate your authenticity, okay? And yes, the witches that we're talking about hexing the moon, they're still real witches. As much as I may have found that a little, distasteful, I might be a chaos witch, okay? And I do love that maxim, all right? Nothing is true, everything is permitted, but hexing the moon was a little wild even for me. I was like, can I get on board with that? I feel like I should maybe force myself to, you know what? No, I'm not hexing the lunar orb today. That's outrageous. But did I ever think that those witches weren't real witches? No, I just didn't necessarily want to go where they wanted to go. Good for them, fair enough, wasn't for me. If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, by the way, over on Witch Talk, there was this whole thing about hexing the moon. Yeah, you can look into it. It was an interesting time. Another thing in this category that's also kind of adjacent is like the pop culture loving witches. They get a lot of shit. I've had a lot of shit for being into mixing my witchcraft with pop culture. Oh my goddess, I've had a lot of shit for that from people all over the internet. No one, I don't think, would dare say it to my face in the wild, but they might have been thinking it, okay? But you know, like connecting with Buffy the Vampire Slayer as your personal lord and savior, or Spock from Star Trek, or I don't know, the spirit of Lane Staley does not make you a fake witch in any way. It makes you a fascinating witch that's like marching to the beat of your own drum, darling. I think some people think this stuff is just like posing or, you know, trolling, when you really sort of bring your pop culture loves, your movies, your songs, your books, etc., your icons into your practice. And I personally just don't understand how people can think that's trolling. That's wild to me. Like, these are the things that make us feel the most sensationally empowered, inspired, and alive. Why the fuck would we not attach that to our witchcraft? It makes absolutely no sense to me why somebody would think that was trolling. Oh, we're not trolling. Oh, honey, when I say I work with Freddie Mercury, I ain't trolling no one, okay? That is happening and has been happening a long time before I knew what I was doing, actually. If you've taken inspiration from pop culture on your witchcraft journey and you've ever felt insecure about that, or you've ever been made made to feel less than for that. I'm here to tell you that not only are you a real witch, but you're also in ridiculously good company. There are a lot of us out there doing that stuff. And you know what? If you don't do it and it's not your flavor, you're also very much a real witch. Spoiler alert, you're also, yes, indeed, a real witch. Darlings, this video is sponsored by Skillshare, the incredible online learning platform where you can feed your brain with tools, resources, courses and learning paths on all kinds of subjects, including business, self-development, creativity, wellness and spirituality, different kinds of crafting skills. Skillshare covers a lot of bases. I always try and choose a course to feature that I know that a lot of you guys will be interested in. And this course by Brooke Glazer, I think, is the one. It's called Productivity for Artists, Organizing Yourself for Success. Brooke is an illustrator with an excellent perspective on creative productivity. So during this course, you can learn about curating your environment so it's set up for success, managing your time, minimizing distractions, and completing projects. The first 500 people to click the link in the description or scan the nifty QR code will receive 1 month's free trial of Skillshare so you can get on there and see what it's all about and feed your mind. Okay, let's get back to the video. Okay, so this one is a big one, all right? You can be a witch if you don't cast spells. Now, this is one that I have definitely seen argued out in the online spaces, and it's something that I've seen some actually very heavy-handed wording about in books as well, is this notion that real witches do spellcraft, and that is what makes you a witch. Witch is really a verb as much as it is a noun, right? It is a way of actually sort of like taking action, and if you're not taking certain actions, you're not a witch. And of course, I've seen it said by very hardliners that, you know, you've got to recognize the Sabbats and you've got to be doing things with the moon, or you've got to be whatever. But of course, that is very culture flavored without people really understanding that that's what it is, that they're expecting others to pick up their brand of witchcraft and use that. But I've definitely heard it very heavy-handedly said that witches do spells, and if you're not doing magic, then you are not a witch, because that is what defines a witch, is that you believe in and you use magic. A lot of people see witchcraft to be a lifestyle, a mindset, an attitude, a way of approaching life, a certain energy that you bring to the things that you do. You know, when people use the word witchcraft, they're going for something actually a lot deeper and a lot broader than just the spellcraft aspect of things. And I've worked with, and I know many witches who actually don't break spellcraft out very often. And I know 2 witches personally who have retired from spellcraft. They actually don't find it to be one of the most useful things in the toolkit, in the practice. And so they actually don't use it. I know a witch that hasn't done a spell for 17 years. She remembers the last time she did a spell, and it was 17 years ago. We had a discussion about it very recently. Hello, my darling, if you're watching. Love you. But yeah, this friend of mine just realized that spellcraft wasn't the most straightforward way to be getting what was necessary. There were other things. There were deals and negotiations with the gods. There is the use of divination, which for her is extremely deep, right? And really gives her a lot more answers and just tells her where to go and gives her clues of what to do next. So really that aspect of things doesn't always need to be involved. It is an incredible tool in the kit. And yes, you know, I think it's fair to say the majority of us, from what I can understand without taking statistics, all right, the majority of us are on the spellcraft gravy train, and it's got biscuit wheels. But not everybody's doing that shit, and that's okay. Perfectly okay. I do not think in any world that doesn't make you a real witch. Okay, this next one is important. You are a real witch even if your politics and your worldview doesn't really seem to align with a lot of other witches. I've seen this thrown around fairly recently. Can anybody guess why?
Hey, I tell what I do. I give you 3 guesses.
Can anybody guess what's going on in the political landscape right now that might cause witches to say to other witches, you're not a real witch if you believe that. You're not a real witch. Now, I don't agree with this term. I wouldn't use this term. I wouldn't throw that accusation at somebody, right? What I would say is that witches actually believe all kinds of shit. And I'm a witch and somebody else might be a witch that is completely politically diametrically opposed to me. And we are both still witches. What that doesn't mean, though, is that we are in community with each other. It doesn't mean that I owe that witch anything just on the basis that we are both witches. That sense of camaraderie and understanding is not just something that you receive because you're a witch and I'm a witch. That's not how this is going to work. And I actually think from some of the comments that I've received lately, from some of the things that I've seen in the wider online discussion, I think that, for example, hardcore Trump supporting witches are surprised that they cannot just feel like they're in comfortable community with those of us that are riling against that kind of rhetoric and that kind of politics. It's almost like they thought that just because they're witches and we're witches, it's all going to be fine and they can say whatever they want and they're not going to be challenged and they're not going to be asked to explain themselves, or they're not going to be told, you know what, we don't talk like that here. You know, they're just going to be allowed into all of our different establishments because, you know, it's on the basis that we're all witches. Not the case, not the case. I'm quite picky about how I choose to spend my energy and spend my focus, and you are not owed my focus or my community just because you are a witch and I'm a witch, right? I would never say you're not a real witch. Baby, if you say you're a witch, okay? But that doesn't mean I want to go and have a picnic with you. I have definitely been mightily attacked by Zionist witches, and they have told me that I am not a real witch for having the beliefs that I have. And I would never, ever say to them, it's not possible for Zionists to be witches. That, you know, those two things are just so opposed in my fucking head. You know, like if you can't understand the plight of what is happening right now, if you don't give a fuck about that, then I don't consider you a witch. I mean, I do, because I just don't think witches fundamentally are defined by being decent people. I think you can be a fucking asshole and be a witch, and good on you, baby. You continue on with that. I know it's really, really hard sometimes when you're reading something or listening to something from a witch and they're saying something and you just think, okay, this is abominable. This is just like, bottom line, so anathema to anything that I think would be decent in a human being. And so it's so easy to switch your mindset into like, you're not even a witch. You know what? Like, you are not even a witch right now. You can't possibly be with those kinds of attitudes. And I think that it's really that sense that we get sometimes that the word witch is so sacred to us. It's so personal. It's so intimately connected to the core of who we are, that if we see somebody else claiming that same word and that same power and that same understanding, it almost feels like it can't be possible. It's like, no, get up. There's no way that you and I can be in the same box in any regard. But you know what? We are in the same box. We're both witches and we both happen to be human beings, and we both have to take responsibility for our behaviours, and we both have an opportunity to form our own opinions. And I just don't think accusing somebody of being, you know, a fake witch is doing anything for the discourse, frankly. You can be a witch and still disgust me. You can be a witch and not be somebody that I want to really continue speaking with. But I think it's that expectation of community that's the problem, right? Like, or friendliness, or, you know, acceptance without accountability. That was never promised, okay, baby? That was never on the table. Academics, skeptics, and scientists can indeed be very, very real witches. I know that there is a lot of insecurity here about that. You know, that comes up, that feeling of like when you're a sass witch, you know, when you are skeptical, atheist, or agnostic and science seeking. Hey, sass witches. Hello, darlings. You can sort of feel like left out, kicked out, like misjudged, misunderstood. And sometimes I think when sass witches are explaining how they feel about things, especially if they are very connected to the psychological magical model, you know, the notion that magic is self-transformative psychodrama, and the notion that deity is archetypal energy, right? Those kinds of things. I think some witches that have a much more deity-oriented and devotional and maybe sort of less science-based way of thinking might also feel a little bit like, that's rubbing me the wrong way. How can that be witchcraft? Are you demeaning what I'm doing? Are you diminishing what I'm doing? In fact, I've had that accusation in comments underneath my videos where I'm talking about what I think about the gods, what I imagine that the gods are, and how it all works. I have certainly had people in my comments section saying, then you don't believe in the gods if you think that. You know, it's diminishing hard polytheist viewpoints. Hard polytheists are the people that believe in the gods. I mean, of course, I don't agree. I think there are many ways of understanding what God energy is. And it's a fascinating subject for me. Fascinating. And I could go on about it. But I think that hard line sense of like, well, if you're just going to put it all down to like science and psychology, then you're offending me because I am a hard polytheist and super mystical and I believe in all of these things very literally. I feel like that's so reductive. Let's not do that. I mean, you can do that if you want to. And by the way, if you do want to do that to me, you'll still be a real witch. If you're a witch and you think sass witches are not for real, then you're still a real witch. I would never accuse you of not being a real, you know what I mean? We can all play in the sandpit. But yeah, sass witches, the sort of skeptical, the atheist, agnostic, the science seeking, the ones that don't relate to a lot of the things that are put in some of the books that we most enjoy to study and talk about. You are so, so real. You are so real. There is nothing fake about you. And I think sometimes it can be difficult for us all to sit at the table, can't it? Fucking hell, we can't agree on lunch. Obviously, if we're going to talk about atheist witches, I think it'd be a good time to talk about syncretism, right? So Jew witches, for example, Buddhist witches, Christian witches. This is a big fucking thing that I've seen people say. Christian witches are not real witches. It's not possible to be a Christian witch. It's an oxymoron. You can't be both a Christian and a witch. Respectfully, I've always massively disagreed with this. In fact, I have kind of a soft spot for Christian witches. I just think it's kind of rad. That's a thing. That's a thing that I've seen. I've seen it in comments underneath my videos recently. This idea that like you cannot be legitimate if you're calling yourself a Christian witch. I just want to say for all my Christian witches watching this, please don't think I agree with that. I would never say that about you. You know, a lot of you have a very, very rich and intriguing and very like deep practice that when you start writing about it in my comments, I feel moved and I feel really like, wow, there's been a lot of thinking here. You know, I think for Christian witches, actually, for a lot of you, it's really interesting because you've had to go way harder into the orthodoxy as well as the orthopraxy. So for a lot of witches, and I want to talk about this a little bit later in the video, for a lot of witches, they might not always really know what they believe. They might not have figured out what they believe. They might be actually doing a lot of orthopraxy, right? The practical shit, without really knowing what is their theological framework. What do they actually believe is happening? And that's fine. But Christian witches, I find, have often had to go through a little bit of a baptism of fire, pun intended, to try and figure out what your orthodoxy is, right? What you actually believe is happening. What is the belief structure? Because it's complex, right? You have to kind of figure out how these things sit together and how is the following of Christ going to work as part of that and all of this kind of thing and bringing the Bible into it. So, you know, orthodoxy wise, you guys are really kind of having a very elite board meeting somewhere. Probably an astral board meeting. And I find that really interesting. Like, I just find that intriguing. I don't think like that it's gross. I don't disrespect it. You know, I think some of the pushback from it comes from trauma and totally understood. But just so you know, you're welcome here, Christian witches. All right, come in, take a seat, take a seat. It's all good. Okay, so the whole thing about how many books you need to read to be considered a real witch, that's done the rounds before. I've seen that happening where people will say things like, you can't mess with that until you've read X many amounts of books. You need to hit the books and then you will really understand and be legitimate and be real and have the right to do something or try something or say something or believe something. I think that's really elitist. It's really uncomfortable. It makes me feel uncomfortable. You know, you can be a witch without reading a single fucking book, right? You know, you can witch without reading a single fucking book. Many, many, many countless people on this planet do. They do that every single day. They're fine without a bookcase. I know it's shocking, right? And for any of you that have seen some of my old videos, you know what my bookshelf looks like, and it's gotten even more out of fucking control, okay? The metaphysical section of my bookshelves is like wild. There's no excuse for it. I shall perish beneath the weight of it should it ever fall on top of me. All right, so don't get me started. I love a book. I really love a book, but we just don't need them to declare ourselves witches or to feel legitimate in our practice. Tell me what you think about this, particularly in the comments. Anyone that has strong opinions on this, I would love for you to let me know, because I've seen a lot of opinions from witches that are like, it's not safe unless you read to understand what you're doing. You know, it's not intelligent to witch without really getting the basics of it and understanding it and for safety and everything else. But like, think about the amount of different situations and cultures and environments and life experiences that witches are going through. Like, not every witch has access to books. Not every witch is like literate. Not every witch has the fucking time. Not every witch has the money or the resources or the whatever it is. Like, are we saying that it's only witches that can like go to the library and get books to read or own books or whatever that are allowed to say they're witches? It's a really slippery slope, isn't it? It's almost like when tarot readers say you're not a real tarot reader unless you've hit the books. You have to do the study. You can't just go straight to intuitive reading. That's not true. That's not true. I've had a couple of incredibly fire readings from people who read intuitively. It was really interesting for me, actually, as someone who took actually the much more book, you know, the book-lined path for quite a while before I allowed myself to slip into the intuitive reading. I was sort of like cramming the books first, you know, before I really let myself, you know, drop into my heart about it. So it was really interesting to get readings from people who don't fuck with the books. They just don't fuck with them. Is it a different kind of experience? Probably on paper it is, but some of the wisdom that can come through when somebody links into that primal understanding is really potent. And I would feel so elitist overlooking it just because I have a nifty little bookshelf of tarot resources. Like, who the fuck am I to say that that is the entry point that is required? Sometimes I will see people brandishing things about, like, you know, I'm a hereditary witch, I have lineage, you know, I come from a specific tradition that is just like more superior, or it's more historic, or we have access to arcane wisdom that nobody else has, which might well be true, but it does not mean you get to accuse other people of being fake witches. You don't need to be initiated into a coven to be a real witch. You can be a solo practitioner and be an absolutely real witch. There are some people that have the experience of working with both coven settings and solo setting, and they actually say that they accessed more with the solo setting, and vice versa as well. It's horses for courses, okay? We're different. One man's meat is another man's poison, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and all those other idioms. Another category, and I have suffered this, okay? The idea that if you charge for services, then you're not a real witch and you're not actually a real reader or whatever service you're giving. You're a charlatan if you charge for your services. I made a whole video about that, okay? I'm going to leave it down below if you want to know my very steadfast opinions, but just be like aware, the opinions, they are fucking opinions. So if you're going to go over there, just be prepared. I am mouthing off and I give no fucks. I can't stand the idea that witches who can do something that people desire that will assist them shouldn't put some food on the table at the end of it. Like, no, I'm sorry. Go to that video if you want more from me on that. There's no need for me to repeat myself here. Hexing doesn't make you a fake witch. And avoiding hexing doesn't make you a fake witch. I made a video about hexing not that long ago, about the ethics of it, and I found it to be a really interesting exploration of some of my more updated positions on hexing. And to be clear, I have no hard line about hexing at all. You can say that it's the last thing you would ever do as a witch, and that's absolutely fine and understandable to me. There was a very disgruntled practitioner underneath that video going off at me in the comments and actually getting aggressive with other people in the comments too. Really enraged that I could say that hexing is understandable and that hexing can sometimes be necessary. I mean, enraged. Like, and this person, this practitioner, told me that they had gone to a really high up member of a New York coven and that they both laughed about me together. Like, bitch, have you seen my fucking body of work on the internet? Have you seen the name of my first book, Rebel Witch? Do you think I would lose even one wink of sleep over the idea that you went to some high-ranking New York City coven leader and you both laughed about me? Fair enough. Fucking have at it. Laugh at me. I don't give a fuck, mate. I do not care. I have not a care in the world.
Without a care or a worry in the world.
That whole statement of like, I went to a high ranking person who's like higher up in the chain of command than you, and we both laughed. It's like, listen, you are just proving with that comment alone that you should not be watching my content. I'm not going to be able to give you anything if you take that kind of attitude. My work is not based around that idea that anything really should have that amount of hierarchy and that amount of like levels of command and levels of respect. I'm a non-traditionalist in pretty much every fucking sense. So you're just not going to get what you want around these here parts. A lot of people have been accused actually of not being real witches based on their unverified personal gnosis. This is something that I have spoken with clients about and audience members about that really causes a lot of insecurity and pain. The main people really that are accusing others of not being real witches are the god gatekeepers, the gatekeepers of the gods, okay? It's kind of like if you say that you had a certain experience with Loki, like someone will come along and be like, I don't think so, sweetheart. That's not a real connection. You do not know what you're doing. You are speaking to a demon. I have a direct line to Loki's on the line with me now, and he's telling me to tell you that that did not happen, right? There is very much a lot of bolshy kind of like dick swinging in the unverified personal gnosis deity world, and it caused me to pull back from it on several occasions as I was going through my journey with communicating with other witches, because it's really unpleasant and it's really foul. I cannot begin to tell you how strongly I believe that both of the people in that kind of argument are real practitioners and they are really having an experience with this being. Pretty much 99.9% of the time, I reckon that's probably what's happening. And I reckon we're just butting heads because we have different personalities and we have different, very, very strong emotional responses to the way that the being is interacting with us. And so we only really want to hear about experiences that match ours. And I get it. I understand. Okay. I work with personified deity. I work with disembodied intelligence. I do understand. I get it. When somebody says something that is like, that's not really my experience, it can be jarring to some degree, maybe on some level or whatever. But throwing around the notion of like, you straight up aren't working with that God is a little strong and it causes damage. And I think that it can be extremely presumptuous of somebody else's practice and experience with little to no context whatsoever. If you are a quiet witch, if you're a private witch, if you have not stepped out of the woo-woo wardrobe at any point, either for reasons of safety, for reasons of comfortability in the community that you live in, or because you're not really actually sure that you want to have conversations with people about your witchcraft, you are still a real witch. You are a real as fuck witch. This is an insecurity that comes up for witches that are not out. And I just want to say right now, like, look into my fucking eyeballs, you are a real witch, baby. You are actually just the fresh, shiny new beads in a very, very, very long line of lineage of witches that have had to keep it the fuck quiet, okay? Like, they have not been able to say anything. They have not been able to let anyone know because it has been illegal. It's been illegal and fucking dangerous to say anything. And so if that's you right now, you know, it's a link. It's a cosmically ancestral link. One more category that I want to mention, and that is just basically like witches that have a bit of a haphazard practice, a practice that changes a lot. You know, I'm a chaos witch. We're very into the paradigm bending. Okay, we're paradigm pirates, paradigm princesses, and we just sort of like surf the seven seas of paradigms. And that's a very like rich aspect of being into the kind of like chaos framework, if you can call it that, the chaos philosophy, if you will. And for a lot of people, that is something that is to be delegitimized and degraded and mocked. I've seen that. I have heard that, okay? As a KO for a long time now, people have just been like, all this paradigm shit is fucked. Like, what do you really believe? It's almost like they think that we are the Jokers or the Riddlers, basically, the Batman villains of magic and the occult, because it just doesn't make any sense. It's like we're literally just coming into clown and troll. And really, that is not it at all. Like, it makes perfect sense to me why I would totally shift paradigms and why I could believe that one paradigm could be the truth and then believe that another completely conflicting paradigm could be the truth. For me, paradox is potent. If that's not for you, fair enough, okay? But it doesn't mean I'm not a real witch, doesn't mean you're not a real witch. I do think it might mean you're a little bit less open-minded than me, but that's all. I'm not touching your witchcraft. I'm not coming for your witchcraft. I'm just coming for your general outlook. If you're somebody with a little bit of a haphazard, kind of like ramshackle practice where a lot of different things are going on and things are changing and you're kind of thinking, what the fuck am I doing? What is going on? Why is everything kind of like melding and blurring and being weird? It's okay. It's all right. Don't panic. It doesn't mean that you're not a real witch. There are things that you can do to ground yourself into practices and routines if you want to do that a bit more. And if you want to work on orthodoxy and you want to write out your beliefs and figure that out, you know, open a Word document, have at it, get started with that, figure it out. Figure out why it is that needs change and why you might believe some things and then other things and then the practice feels a little unhinged. If you want to work on that for yourself, do so, but don't do it because you feel like other witches expect it of you or it's the way to feel that you are authentic. No, you are authentic anyway. You are doing good. You are doing fine. So my darlings, what do I think a real witch is? I think a real witch is someone who tells me they're a witch, okay? I think self-identification is sacred. And if somebody identifies themselves as a witch, I take that at face value. I understand that it means what it means for them, but that it is very legitimate and it is very real for them. Again, it doesn't mean that we need to, you know, hold hands and have a picnic and sing Kumbaya. It does not mean that we need to all be in very intimate community, but it's not something that I would ever try to strip from them or make them insecure or doubtful of. I do not feel possessive over witchcraft. And so I suppose that's why I try not to lose any sleep about who is or is not a real witch. I believe that if you've claimed the word, then you are the word. And that's as far as it goes. I don't ask you to qualify it. I'm not going to ask you to meet my standards around it. I don't think there is any single tradition or lineage or outlook or aesthetic that makes you a legitimate witch or not. I think we are all real witches. As I said in my book, Witch in Darkness, we are all real witches. I could never judge it. I could never figure it out, because really the legitimacy is in the heart of the witch. It's in your relationship with your witchhood. How can I possibly even know 5% of that? I've been working with some of the clients I've been working with on and off around their practice for years, right? They'll come back to me about various things. Over time, we've had catch-ups, we've had chats, we've had readings. I've gotten to actually follow some of my clients' practices because I hear about them when we have check-ins and stuff. And even though I've had those really deep dive conversations with clients, and I know some of you are watching that have had a reading with me or a session with me or whatever, and really have felt at the end of it that you've never spoken to anyone so deeply about your practice. And that's the privilege of my life, to be able to have that with people. But even at the end of a conversation that's so deep about where somebody is in their practice and why, I don't end that call and think, I know that person. I know their heart. I know their witchhood. I know their level of potency. I know their level of ability. I know about 5% of it max. People are abyssal. Every practitioner is an abyss of information and like desire and curiosity and understanding, and like, really, I can only know so little. It's just really scraping that bit off the top. Even if somebody says, you know, I really cracked myself open and told you so much that I've never told anyone, I know there's so much more. There's so much more that could even be crammed into 100 hours worth of conversation. And so I try to really humble myself in that regard, to never think that I can assume ever that somebody's not a real witch by their standard or mine, just by one thing they said or just by how they live their life. That doesn't make sense to me. And I think it weakens and lessens my own witchhood to think that I can do that. It's not good for me. It's actually not healthy for me to think that way. There is no certification system to become a witch. There is no particular kind of way that you need to perform your witchhood to get people to kind of like clap and co-sign and agree with each other. You know, and I like that about witchhood. I wouldn't want it to be any different. So why would I allow myself to succumb to these ideas about standards and about, you know, qualification to be able to say that you understand witchhood or that you are a witch? If you're not a perfect witch at every point, if you fuck up, if you fall down, if you lose track of your practice, if you haven't picked up the phone to your gods for a while, you're still a real witch, you know? If you feel like you have not been able to effectively harness magic to be able to deal with some of your material problems at this moment, you're still a witch, 100%. If you're confused about what you believe, you know, if you really just don't know, then that's okay too. That's perfectly fine too. Everything is shifting and moving at times, and it can be very disorienting. But if you just ground yourself into some practices that you don't need to think about too much, you don't need to overthink too much, then you can still have a really fruitful practice and not really know what type of witch you are, or really what you believe about deity or divination. It's a journey. When did we stop enjoying it? Well, I think a lot of us are enjoying it, but I think some people really worry about it. They are kind of like, shit, I need to finish the journey and get to the end point so that I know what kind of witch I am. And I guess I'm speaking to you in this moment. If you have insecurities about not really knowing what kind of witch you are or what's going on for you, I want to give you an opportunity to like just take some breaths, drop your shoulders, drop the tension, and say, I love this wild journey. It's a spiraling labyrinth, and I am so invested. I'm so locked in to my spiraling labyrinth of belief and practice. My witching personally is about what I do. It's about who I am, and it's about how I think. It's about how I live my life. Witchhood for me is a kind of compass. It's not just about the fact that I have an altar and I have a goddess and I like, you know, recognize Samhain. Sure, those are hallmarks of the type of witchcraft that I have been exposed to and that I felt would be fruitful for me and made sense to me and that I understood, right? And the chaos stuff the same, you know. I'm very, very interested in experimentation, in innovation, and in weirding myself out. I'm a psychonaut and I want to go in different directions and I want to honor my paradoxes. But for me, it's so much more than just that. It's an attitude, which is a way of being for me. And I can bring that into everything. The way that I have conversations with people, the way that I set boundaries, the way that I conduct my business, the way that I learn things, right? Witchcraft is kind of an approach to things for me. And it's about so much more than just how much time I spend at my altar. It is so much more of a guiding force than that. If somebody ever accuses you of not being a real witch, right? Try and think about what they might have to gain from saying that to you. Is it a self-aggrandizing thing, perhaps? Because it could be. It could be an insecurity thing. It could be that feeling that it's a zero-sum game for some people. It's either their way that's right or it's your way that's right, and they can't possibly see a version of the world right now where it could be both. Honestly, it could sometimes just be because they're trying to fucking sell something. You know, some people do get very, very bolshy about who is real and who is not real on the basis that they want to have this perceived inflated authority, because that authority leads to sales or bookings or attention or, you know, social media increase in likes or follows or whatever the fuck, right? Like sometimes it's that, honestly, plainly and simply. Sometimes it's glorifying one's own perspective so that, you know, you can feel that sense of superiority over somebody else and feel like you're definitely right because of some fear that you have. And sometimes I just think people want to distance themselves actually from other people that might seem like appalling to them or really angering to them. I know it sounds trite and like, you know, simplistic to say this, but it's a little bit like the way you feel when your arch enemy really, really loves the same band as you and you find out and you're like, you can't like Tool, you can't possibly like Deftones, you wouldn't understand them. Where would you even begin? It's like a kind of territorial thing, and it feels weird because it's like, oh my God, like I accessed that band so deeply. I have the lyrics from that band tattooed on me. How can you also claim to have this really, really deep connection with this band? How can we be going to the same gig? Like, how can you have anything to do with me? It's kind of a little bit like that. It's like witchcraft is so personal and so beloved to us that it just feels a little bit upending sometimes if we feel like we also share that passion and that identity with someone, you know, whom we wouldn't maybe piss on if they were on fire sometimes, in some cases. And if you are accusing yourself sometimes of not being a real witch, I want to welcome you to be gentle with yourself in this moment, okay? And then ask yourself a question. Ask yourself this question. Are you accusing yourself of being a fake witch because in some way you know that you could be thriving or growing or strengthening in a way that you are not pushing yourself to? You know, you are aware that you have a bit more potency or a bit more energy that you could be putting into your witchhood, but you're holding yourself back or something. And it's causing you to kind of like cannibalize your own confidence and say, well, I guess I'm not a real witch then. Because if so, then the next step is to stop calling yourself out and call yourself in. Choose some actions, manageable, realistic actions that are going to put you into closer alignment with your goal. But if you are just accusing yourself of being a fake witch to bully yourself, to demean yourself, you know, or because it's a continuation of some of the voices that you've heard directed towards you in earlier life or whatever, come home to yourself now and come home to your witchhood. Use it as a place of sanctuary. Celebrate it. Give yourself a hug. Knock that shit off. It's cruel to yourself and it's not true. Discover the witch that is inside of you and harness that witch that is inside you and grow from there and really celebrate what is there instead of trying to shave yourself into a different shape or tell yourself that you don't belong. That's not fair on you. Darlings, I have loved sharing my thoughts and feelings about this topic with you. Please let me know down in the comments any and all thoughts that you had. I always love reading through. I love a little scroll. I just love to have a little midnight scroll and see what you all are saying and get involved. If you would like to have some witchcraft mentoring with me, I'm going to leave the links down below to both the single session and also the package options for sessions so we can work on your journey of witchhood together. And you will also find at my online store lots of other mentoring options and reading options. I occasionally do workshops so we can have a bit of a community vibe. So it's all there. And also check out my Patreon. There is so much going on over on Patreon every single month. I've got printables, I've got audio offerings, I've got one card riff tarot videos every month. I've got a Discord, okay? It's a party, okay? We have disco balls, you know, we have treats. Come in and be part of it, darlings. It was amazing to be here. It's lovely to have this channel after all these years and have this community. It's lovely. You make me happier than a bird with a French fry. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. You also make me happier than a bird with a French fry. And don't forget to click the link in the description to get the free trial. Much love, blessed be, stay safe, keep witching. Mwah.